I'm Christina Rea, and welcome to Breaking Out of Breaking In, a practical filmmaking podcast about taking your creative career into your own hands and making great work that gets seen without playing the Hollywood game.
Or at least while changing the rules. Hi, I'm Bri Castellini, your other co-host, and today we are breaking down whether we could be persuaded back into the indie production game after so many years away. But before we dive in, remember that we release bonus content for each episode over on patreon.com/breakingoutpod. So if you want to support us and get yourself even more information and resources, definitely check us out over on Patreon. So this is an episode that went through a last-minute pivot because we realized the idea we had previously was one we'd already talked about. We can't remember when, but we know it happened.
Yeah.
So, welcome to this episode.
Yeah, welcome.
When was your last, when were you last on set?
November 2019, I directed Game Brunch, my short. It was November 9th and 10th, I remember. And yeah, that was it. I obviously didn't know going into 2020 that would be that for nearly 3 years.
Did you have plans for another project that in theory?
So that was a weird year because I was still working at Seed and Spark full time and wanted out but didn't see a way out. So it seemed like I was there, for a long haul, but cut to a year later and I was completely out of the company.
Sure.
I feel like for me, I'm always expecting to make at least one short. At least then I was always expecting to make at least one short for the year. And I had been revising my feature previously known as Silent Night. I don't even know if I can or should say the new title, so I'm just going to call it previously known as Silent Night. I had been revising it lately, but it was still something that was I'm never going to get to make this because I need a lot of money, but it's something I really want to make one day somehow, so I'm going to keep working on it. So yeah, it was I'm probably going to make a short next year. We'll see how 22... Actually, it was the first year I remember Congested Cat, we put out a list of goals at the end of 2019 for the company. And
I remember this.
Officially couldn't do any of them once the pandemic hit. But one of them was that we were going to, for the first time, apply for the Queen's Council of the Arts grant for a short film. We actually were going to do it both for a short and for indie works to get funding because you could apply as both a business and as an artistic project.
Okay.
Figuring we would, hopefully get one of them.
Sure.
So, yeah, in my mind, I was going to make a short. I just hadn't written it yet or planned it yet.
Gotcha. Wow. Yeah, as I'm thinking back, the last two sets that I was on were as a director, which is, as much as I love directing, not the thing that I am, certainly not first and foremost, which is interesting. So the last real set that I was on was May 2019, which is when I was on the set for Better With You, the web series that I directed in Utah. And that was when I was in between my jobs at Starable and Seed and Spark. So I didn't even work for Seed and Spark yet. Officially, the last production that I was a part of was a little web series that a former student of mine made called Rosalie. So I directed the final episode of that web series February 2021. So we had we'd shot something, I think, in February 2020. We'd shot episode 5, I believe. And then something happened the next month. We made episode 5 and released it. And then I was moving, obviously, away from New York in February 2021. And so because the last episode could be mostly shot outside or with 2 people, we followed all the COVID restrictions, wore masks the whole time, social distanced. Everyone had to test before we got on set. And I directed the final bit of that the day before I left New York for good. So it counts. It was a much tinier production. There was 2 crew members in addition to me, kind of a thing. It was more a completionist thing versus we really want to make the project a thing. So, that wasn't the plan to be the last thing that I made, but there it was. Then I almost produced the web series pilot for Dead on Arrival last year.
Oh, yeah.
Almost. I have a Slack, like an entire Slack channel that I had like organized and put a bunch of documents into. I made a breakdown. I made a preliminary budget and a preliminary breakdown for special effects because I knew that would be a consideration. I had a preliminary meeting with a DP about it, and then that fell apart because the two women who were going to like be my fellow executive producers both ended up backing out for just like timing and, you know, needing to focus on other things, which is totally fair. But like without that, I'm not going to solo produce.
Yeah.
I'm just not going to do it. That's one of my lines, is that like if I am the only producer or the only real producer, even if someone else is getting a producing credit, I'm too old for that.
Same. I feel the same about that. Before we get into that, I should probably also mention that I did technically make 7 short films starring my cats in 2020.
Feline fables.
Yes, feline fables. They were silly shorts about cooped up cats. And it was really just me and my phone and my cats. And occasionally I would rope in other Congested Cat team members or actor friends to either shoot footage and then like do like a shot reverse shot as if they were in the same room as the cats, or do voiceover for them. And they were like 1 to 3 minutes long at most. I actually don't even think any of them were 3 minutes. That was fun, but definitely not like a real set. It was just a way to get creative.
Sure.
And
I mean, and I guess technically the last thing that I was in like production for midway through 2020 in like August, we made a special episode of Salmon Powder Depressed. But like, and I was talking about this with the director of that episode the other day. And I was like, I don't know if I count that as being on set because like for you, because we shot that, the director and my co-star Christine were in Los Angeles. I was still in New York at the time, and so like we shot our bits of the episode on separate coasts, and we just did it on Zoom. And like on their side, you know, the director was in place. They had lighting, like all that kind of stuff. On my side, it was me and my husband trapped in an apartment and, you know, just doing our best. So like it's officially a production, but like it didn't feel like one because it was just me alone with like my friend on a phone on Zoom off to the side. Like, right. That's not what I'm thinking about when I'm like, I miss being in production, because as much as I'm happy we made that project, it's one of my favorite scripts that I've ever written, and it was a really, really fun thing to do. Like, that sucked as a process. Both because I'm like not an actor in a way that, you know, I want to continue to be. And like I am not the kind of person, certainly anymore, to produce at any cost, you know, like whatever it takes to get it done. Like, yeah, I'll just lock myself in a room. Like I couldn't do the Bo Burnham inside. Like that does not creatively fulfill me in any way. So that's probably why I don't think about that when I'm thinking about like the last things I was on set for.
Yeah. I mean, like, I miss working with actors. You know, my cats, where it was really just like setting up a camera and waiting for my cats to look in the direction I want them to look in, you know?
Sure.
So it's like, for me, November will make... No, I can't even do math anymore. Yeah, I mean, we're already past the 3-year mark. So I was hoping, I should say I was really hoping to be directing my feature this fall.
Sure.
So, like, I guess I have a lot to say about that. I just don't know how to, like, navigate this conversation.
What do you mean? Like, as in, like, what you're allowed to divulge?
No, I guess just, like, how to structure the episode.
The episode that we're structuring on the fly as we just have a conversation. I mean, let's just go there. Like, yeah, something that was brought up and then cut out of an episode that was released recently was you putting out positivity into the universe that you weren't going to consider indie production for a little while because you were going to be directing your feature this fall. Unfortunately. Right. That was before the SAG strike. Yeah. Once the writer's strike happened, we were not going to struck companies for money, but there was like a window of hope that money could be found outside of struck companies. Especially if you got cast attached. Especially, right. But then once the SAG
strike started, that went completely out the window. And of course I support it, but that sort of crushes this momentum that I feel going into production. Like I felt like there was a real strong possibility, especially at the start of this year when we locked the script and started talking about production, that it was going to happen this fall. Mm-hmm. And so now all of that is just like cut short.
Sure.
And so I guess I have like two different feelings, because there's the feeling of doing the indie thing and making a kind of low budget short right now versus ever again. And I have two different feelings on the matter, I guess.
Okay. So what's the first feeling?
Okay, so I did a lot of, I guess, introspection over the last couple weeks. So a couple weeks ago, or a week ago, what is time? I don't know. I did a Instagram story to close friends, basically being like, my feature's not happening this fall like I had hoped. And, you know, I'm really, really hoping that on the other side of the strike, the double strike, we can get the momentum back and get it together, whether it's like spring cheated for fall or all the way next fall. But in the meantime, I'd like to get a short going because I miss directing and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, so if anyone wants to, you know, help with that, whatever. And I got a bunch of friends who were like, you know, that'd be fun. What are you thinking? Actor friends more than anything. And I think then, like, as everyone kind of got excited about it, like about me making another film, because I haven't made a film in over 3 years, as I'm realizing, I was like, okay, like step back, because it would be so easy for me to be old Christina and go like tunnel vision and just like go for it. And it's like, great, moving forward, start planning, making it happen. And I was like, let me actually think about this. And I started to come to a few conclusions. So like, I do miss directing. Like I do miss being on set. I miss collaborating. And I'm eager to get to that. However, I don't miss wearing all the hats, and like the things that burnt me out used to burn me out, whether I was realizing it or not. I don't miss like grinding and hustling and putting all of me into a thing without a real return, because I don't have the resources to like really get it out there. Sure. And none of that has changed just because my film is on hold and I miss directing. And I think what I was having this like internal debate when I realized my film wasn't going to happen now. It could nearly be 5 years if we're talking about next fall. You know what I mean? Sure. Like, so I was having this internal debate where it's like, okay, will I be rusty? Like my directing skills are rusty because it's going to be so long since I've actually like talked with actors and had to think on the fly and, you know, problem solve so quickly and whatever. But on the other side of that, if I put all of myself into a short right now, I could burn myself out. I could be burnt out going into like the biggest project of my life and career, you know?
Right.
And so I was like, what do? I don't want to be either one of those things. And the real catalyst was my manager. I had a call with my manager when she was basically like, yeah, it's not happening this year. Unless like some miracle happens, it's just not happening. And she was like, even if like a miracle happened and the strikes ended tomorrow and we got funding and actors attached and everything, like you would be rushing. And do you really want to be rushing through prep? And especially because like the schedule we're talking about is like a 20-day shoot. There's a shit ton of action in this script. Like, I don't want to be rushing through that prep.
And you'd
Absolutely
be with a
not.
new crew primarily.
So,
like learning
new
new
everything.
Yeah.
It would be in Chicago. Like, it would be a whole new world in a variety of ways. And I already feel like that rushed schedule is a little bit like being set up to fail, though like that's not the fault of the people involved. It's just like budgets and how things work and whatever. But like, yeah, so prep is everything, right? Yeah. So that made me realize like, yeah, it's not happening this year. But she was like, I encourage you, if you feel compelled to make a short that you can finish before the year ends, like go ahead and do it. I encourage you to do it. So then I was like, oh yeah, let me do it. So I made that post, you know? But then I was like, having this internal debate and also thinking about like all the things I just said about how doing it all myself is not something I want to put myself back into. And it was actually a conversation with my mother-in-law over the weekend. She was visiting for Justin's birthday. I was kind of like talking her through this debate, and she was basically like, you're sort of just like putting yourself between a rock and a hard place. Like, you're doing it to yourself, because she was like, what does that serve you to worry about these two hypothetical scenarios where you lose and you lose? Like, how is that serving you? And also, I think she didn't say this, but like stuff she said got me thinking that like I'm a good director, and I've made so many fucking things that I've like problem solved all the problems, and it's not a if you don't use it you lose it thing, you know.
Right.
Like I am
like
ready
riding a
and
bike.
right, like I'm ready and I'm prepared and I've got the experience and the fortitude that I could do it. And so like I shouldn't let imposter syndrome be the thing that pushes me to make a short.
Right. The decision shouldn't be fear of being rusty.
Right, exactly. And she was like, you're thinking, you're operating, trying to think all with your head. It's like all in your head and strategy, and you should be following your gut and your heart and what are you actually driven to do. And so then I was kind of like, okay, yeah. And I had, like last night when I couldn't sleep, I had this very ridiculous analogy. The analogy is, I feel like right now with my feature, I had all this like momentum and rising energy. And it's almost, what I feel like right now is almost like an incomplete orgasm where...
I was wondering if that's where you were going with it, because
yeah, so I was like, almost there.
Right.
Everything's like...
You're being edged creatively.
Yes. But then like a rhythm stopped or shifted and just like ended it, and it's incredibly frustrating. And I'm trying to like, and this is where the analogy makes no sense, because like I don't like, you can't like re-get back your orgasm. You can only like work your way towards a new one. Sure. Or, you know, whatever. Like,
of
it's not a good analogy.
or lesser value.
Yeah, sure, yeah. So the point though is, or maybe it's like a sexual situation, right? So I'm trying to make this analogy make sense.
It's important that the analogy makes sense. We should not move forward until we get there.
Instead of just like ending the encounter and being like, that sucks, and then later on starting a new one and hoping that has completion. It's like, no, recommitting to this encounter and getting it back on track and getting it to a satisfying conclusion. And so I feel like pivoting to a short would be me like trying to compensate for this thing that I really want. But I'm going to be doing it sort of half-heartedly, because I'm still like really all my momentum and my energy and my excitement and like this desire that I have for production and all that is all about this project that I've been working on for years now.
Right.
And it wouldn't be fair. Not only would it like very likely burn me out, but it wouldn't be fair to all the collaborators who would sign on for a short if I'm doing it half-heartedly. You know?
How much of this do you think is a factor of like what happens once the film is done? Because from what it sounds like, and tell me if I'm wrong about this, but it sounds like the production aspects, you know, if you got the circumstances right, would be fine. But it's the, you know, old Christina Rhea, full court press, festival run, like marketing plan premiere. Like that's the stuff that you're kind of worried about. And you don't want to let people down having made a thing and not do the usual Christina Rhea experience. Is that?
I think it's a mix of both. It's definitely that, because like to the point that you were making at the beginning, it's like, to what end? What is the end goal of making a short right now? And I think for me, it would be like, I just want to be creative with some cool people again. But asking people to work for free or very little and like dealing with COVID, you know, because that's still a thing, and like hazard issues, like all of that isn't quite worth it for just like the fun of being creative with creative, cool people. for the people involved. Like, I think that's the thing is like people, all of my friends, all of the people I collaborate with are serious about their careers and are trying to get to a next level. And festivals, getting it seen, maybe winning some awards, like all of that makes it worthwhile for them because they are trying to push forward, and all of those things like are a domino in that effort, right? And there's like a line, like asking my friends to do some voiceover for some cat videos, like that's like a fun favor. That's a low
ask.
It's a low ask, but you know, come to like upstate or whatever and be around all these people for X amount of sleep in a cabin or whatever, you know, like that kind of stuff is a bigger ask. And so there should be some ambition to the end result. There should be some commitment to it going somewhere, which I could promise in the past because like I had it in me and it was the thing I felt driven to make in that moment, you know, short, feature, whatever. But that wouldn't be the case with this. It would be like a consolation prize for me, which is not.
Fair. I also think you should let people tell you no before you just say, I don't think that this is serious enough for them. Because
sure.
Yeah, especially since the pandemic, I'm sure that a lot of the people that you used to collaborate with are missing the camaraderie of being on set with you and might be happy to just have something new to do. Might take it as like, yeah, I'll take a vacation upstate.
That's absolutely true. It's just like also for me financially. So that's the other piece of it. And I'm still talking about all right now because I will say that everything you're saying appeals to me for the future after I've made my feature and I've done the thing I've been like geared up to do for years.
Once you had the orgasm you were anticipating, not the consolation orgasm.
That's right. It'll be like multiple orgasms all over the place. Shorts here, shorts there. But
be an orgy of orgasms.
Yes. But in this particular moment,
right,
I need to see this sexual encounter through. But so yeah, like everything you're saying, it does appeal to me because I do miss that, especially going through like now over a year of notes with executives and thinking about like what name we can get for this role that's going to make all these like white dudes give us money, you know, like all of that stuff. To go back to like the roots and the core of just like making things for fun with fun people. Like, yeah, I will miss that. I do miss that, but I just don't have it in me to like go through it right now until I finish this thing. Even if it, you know, and like I'm really, really hoping it does happen, but I feel like finishing it would also be getting every no, asking, like knocking on every fucking door that I could possibly knock on and getting every single no, and then having to put it to bed would be devastating, but it would at least like close the chapter.
Yeah, at least be closure.
Yeah.
There's and not so this lingering what if.
Yeah. And so until that point, this is like, I've just got to ride this out. And, you know, and like things might change where I'm just like, oh, I see a really small something I could make that just comes together with whoever, you know, that might change. But right now, like me spearheading it fully, it just doesn't feel like the right thing. And I was kind of like, what am I being driven to do right now? Oh, and that was the other point I was going to make. When I made Game Brunch, and we made a bunch of other shorts before that, I self-funded them. You know, yeah, they were like $2,000 to not even. I don't think I've ever spent $5,000 on a short. Maybe outside of a crowdfunding. I did crowdfund, you know, one once, but like Game Brunch cost $3,000. I was working a full-time job, and so I could just fund that. And now I'm not. So then that would also be the thing to tackle too, is like finding money to make the thing. Because I do have a standard now where it's like it needs to be of a certain production value or it's not worth it.
Yeah, 100%.
You know?
And those were conversations when we were in theory, when we were in pre-production for the thing that didn't end up happening. Like a conversation we all had early on was like, if we don't get a certain amount of money, and I think for us it was $10,000. It was like, if we don't have $10,000 to make this at minimum, we just walk away. Because we have all done the no budget. We've done the tiny bit of budget. It's like we if we don't have at least this and we aren't getting paid at the very least a day rate for being on set, then it's not worth it. And so like we all collectively agree on this number. If we can't hit it, you know, we're done. We're out. And that is a consideration you have to make. Because, yeah, you don't want to go backwards. Like,
yeah,
it's
right.
not film school anymore. We're not
Even
experimenting for the sake of it. Like, we're professional people.
Right. Even if it's for fun, there should still be a level of quality.
Right.
Out of respect for all the people involved who are
out of respect for yourself.
Pursuing, yeah, and who like, because yeah, we're professionals and they're pursuing a career and they want quality material to show as their latest work, right? And so that like that's a big factor too. If I had just like money to just, if someone was like, here's $5,000-$10,000, like make a thing, that would be maybe a lot easier to just like run out and do it. So then I was kind of like talking to my mother-in-law where she was like, you should be following your gut and follow what you feel driven to do. And it was like, what are you driven to do? And so I really started to kind of like search within myself for that. And other than making my feature, because I'm very driven, I'm very geared up and ready to go and like have this stifled feeling,
right.
An incomplete orgasm and trying to just like accept that. And again, hope that on the other side, there will be closure. But the other thing is like, I've been doing a lot of DIY projects around my house. And I think that's been like driven by three things. One is it's been really just like fun to put creativity into something I can do on my own and like tap into a part of myself I haven't really used in the past. And I also think the other thing is that I'm a little bit like chasing the dopamine hits of feeling accomplished, every time I finish a thing, like, oh, I'm feeling productive. I did this. And then the other piece is a little bit like, is a kind of a sadness. It's a bittersweetness, but I feel like I've been driven to fulfill this feeling of making our home feel like our home. And it's a thing I'm chasing that I don't think I'll ever quite accomplish because a fundamental piece of our family is gone, and that's our cat Addie. And so like our home doesn't feel fully complete because she's not here. And so, but for better or worse, I just like I have to again complete that cycle and fulfill all the drive in me to work on my home. And then and like the last piece of this, I guess, is I realized that maybe getting the fall back instead of having to go into production on my feature and go like tunnel vision on that. Maybe it's a gift because last fall Addie died on September 6th and I just sort of like sunk into the couch and was a non-existent lump for all of the fall and just like felt awful. And I love the fall. And that was our first fall living up here. And so maybe this year I'll actually get to experience it instead of being in production and, being devastated. And also I imagine around the anniversary of her death, as I've been feeling lately, because Addie and Vic's birthday is coming up, I've been feeling her absence more, and I imagine around the anniversary of her death, I'll probably have a lot of feelings that I should give myself the space to fully experience. And because that's real and that's probably going to happen. And I have a tendency to sort of like distract myself with productivity, and that's like the kind of thing that does burn you out. And so I should anticipate that and make sure that I feel my feelings. And lastly, we're building an office for me. Our house is technically a 2-bedroom. It has a basement den, but it's not. That's where I'm recording right now, but it's not like, for a variety of reasons, it's not really ideal for an everyday office. And so it's been in the making since last summer, and it's finally coming true, hopefully. Like, we're in the works with a contractor to close in part of our deck to turn it into my office. And it will be finished in the fall. And if I were going into production, I would be like flying away from it and going tunnel vision on my film and not really getting to enjoy or appreciate the thing that cost a lot of money and time and like, effort to make. And instead, I'll get to actually enjoy it and decorate it and like complete this cycle that I've been going through of DIY homemaking. And so that's like the silver lining, I guess, in all of it. And I feel like instead of trying to prove that I can still direct, because ultimately that's, I think, what's driving that, even though, of course, there is like, I miss just collaborating. It's really, what I really should do is just like follow my gut and give myself space to just experience the fall. And also our script, like, that's the other thing that I'm feeling driven to do too, because it doesn't require all of me in the way that a production would. And I'm really loving it. I'm loving the progress on it. And so I think the more we can make it better throughout this year, the more opportunity we'll have on the other side of whatever comes next with it.
Totally. We've also had three new ideas for like what would be the follow-up if we were to make our brand just like being mad about our industry.
Yes. But I'm not saying like never again, no budget filmmaking, or like wearing all the hats, self-producing, making a short. Like, I love storytelling, and if I have a story that if I feel compelled to tell it, and it is smaller and shorter and whatever, I see myself in the future very much doing that and going back to that. I don't believe in this, like, the way the industry is like, oh, you have to go bigger each time. You can't go small again. I do believe in like not going backwards in terms of like quality and progress from a craft perspective, but from like a format
or life experience of
right,
everyone
absolutely.
On set.
Right, but I don't think that
no more donuts
like
for Crafty for the morning and that's it.
Right, exactly. But I don't think that, you know, once you've made a feature, you can't ever make a short again, or like once you've made $100,000 feature, you can only now make $1 million feature, and then once you've done that, you can only make a $5 million. Like, I don't believe in any of that. I think it's just like you follow the story and you follow your heart as an artist, because ultimately that's what I am. That's what we are. So yeah, like for the future, there are a lot of things that could get me back on set if it feels right in that capacity. But for right now, it's like my feature I've been working on forever or bust. Like, it's nothing. No set. That or just continuing to be a country bumpkin doing semi-decent DIY projects on my house.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, I think you struck on something there that resonated with me, which is the, like, what is the thing? Like, I feel like if I had a script that I was super, super, super excited about, I could, you know, get it off the ground. Money, we can talk about in a little bit, is still a consideration, certainly. But yeah, ultimately what's been keeping me off set is less circumstance in most cases and more, I don't have the thing that I want to work on, you know? Yeah. And that's not just because I spent the last 2 years writing novels for some fucking reason, but it's also because, like, I was never a short writer, you know? I was a web series creator, and web series are a lot fucking harder, especially because I've been writing ones that are a little too big for my britches.
Yeah.
Dead on Arrival was never feasible on a full season level, which is why we were considering just making the pilot. I rewrote the pilot to make it kind of close-ended, but it's a mystery story, so there's really no way to tell a mystery story's pilot in a satisfying way that's not just going to feel like a proof of concept, which isn't fair to anyone who isn't me. So, like, to your point about, like, wanting to make it worth people's time, and this is a conversation I had with a couple of people where it's like, yeah, ultimately, the web series version of Dead on Arrival is the proof of concept for the full-length TV show that I want to write, called Dead on Arrival, and with most of the same characteristics. And if I am not paying people, and even if I am, a proof of concept that they have no skin in the game for once the concept is proved is not a great value for them. And that's super fair. And even with that, it's like, I didn't want to tell this close-ended pilot. I wanted to tell the pilot and keep making the show. So, you know, outside of Ace and Anxious, I've never really had a short film idea that I really liked. I've had, like, sketch ideas. I obviously co-wrote Buy-In, but that was more a function of myself and Colin Hinckley, my co-writer on that project, just wanting to do a thing together. And so like that was more of a creative exercise, I would say. And it was much more like him driven in terms of story. Ace and Anxious remains the only story that I wanted to tell that was exactly the right length to be a short film and never wanted to be anything more. And since then, since 2016, I have had no good ideas for short films. And so it's hard to think about going back on set because feasibly the only thing that I could make is a short. And I don't like writing shorts. And that's always going to be the stopping point. If I had a script that I loved and was obsessed with, like Ace and Anxious, I will move heaven and hell to get it made. You know, I would figure it out. That's how like Ace and Anxious came together in less than 6 months from the idea before I even wrote the script to finishing production. Like it was truly so just spark. Like we had a thing, I had an idea, I put it together because there was just no other option. That hasn't happened since then. And I don't really want to waste my time or the time of people around me if I don't have an idea that I'm genuinely passionate about that feels right for that format. But also, if someone gave me $10,000, maybe I'd have a different thing to say, you know, and that's always going to be the case. Now I don't have a job either, and I have savings, and in theory, I could use those savings to like shorten the amount of time I can be comfortably unemployed before I find the next thing that I'm doing. And, you know, I could self-fund a film right now. Why? To what end? Again, I don't have the thing. If I had the thing, maybe we'd be having a different conversation, but I just don't. So unless I have like no strings attached money or the thing, there doesn't really seem to be a point of making it. And before anyone asks, I don't want to crowdfund. Hopefully
Same.
ever.
Yeah, no way.
And I feel bad saying that, especially because it seems like a lot of my post-Seed and Spark freelancing is going to be in crowdfunding consulting, and I'm happy to have those conversations. But like for me, I maybe have one more in me. But similarly to these conversations about production, I would only do it for the thing.
Right.
And I
that's
don't
like,
have it.
That's how I feel about just like fundraising in general. Like even if I were to try not just crowdfunding, but other avenues, it's like, it's gotta be the thing now that I'm so in love with and just feel so compelled to make because I don't feel like I have another ask at this point. And it's like, well, that I already have that project that I'm so in love with and feel so compelled to make, you know? And so if the thing that I'm going into is not that, then that's a sign I shouldn't be making it, at least not right now.
Yeah.
You know? And I do have I have a short that I really love that I wrote last year that I sent to a couple actors and like they were into it and I could go make it, but again it's just like it's not fair if it's not the thing that I feel so compelled and driven to do and bring to life right now.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that I was saying last year when I started writing novels and like the whole time I was like very bemused by the whole process. Like, why am I doing this? And a phrase that I kept coming back to was like, I'm trying not to police the muse anymore. And I feel like that's true here too, where it's like, if I am compelled to make something, I will. I don't want to judge myself. I don't want to force myself because I want to be back in production to just like, you know, do a short film sweatshop, right? Like I don't want to just like force myself to come up with a bunch of ideas so that eventually something comes out of that. Like I'm not in that zone of my career or my creative pursuits anymore. And also like, to what end? If I'm excited about the things that I'm currently working on, even if they don't lead me to set, and I am, then, you know, who am I to judge? If I get back on set, amazing. But for right now, I do not feel particularly compelled to because I'm feeling compelled elsewhere. And I'm perfectly happy with that.
Yeah, yeah. And also I think, you know, age, like getting older makes you think about money differently.
Yeah.
And, you know, like Justin and I are not planning to have kids. We have our cats. We'll always have cats. And that, like, they are an expense, but they're not a child who has to go to college one day expense.
So you're not sending Vic to college.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And so it's like we can spend money a little bit differently. Like I still have a whole family of working class people that are like not financially stable. So that's a piece for me that will always be a thing. But like otherwise we can be a little bit looser with our savings and like, for instance, spend some of it on, you know, building an office off of our house. But of course, like maybe one day we'll sell our house, and that's how we'll like pay for, I guess, the nurse who's going to take care of us when we're old because we're not having kids. Because like Vic, I mean, obviously he's going to outlive us because he has to. But could he really take care of us? I don't know. I don't think so.
I don't see Vic helping you in the bathroom.
I agree. Yeah. We're just a little too heavy for him to, yeah.
Not by much,
so,
but just a little.
Just a little, yeah. So, we have to like think about how we'll pay for that, and our house is how we'll do that one day. Point I was making is that we can be a little bit looser. However, you buy a house and everything becomes scary because it's like you have a mortgage. Our first year here, a pipe burst and we had to replace a wall. And then we found out that like another wall wasn't insulated at all and the pipes were freezing. And like it's been a bunch of projects that just pop up out of nowhere. And so
that you're solely responsible for. You can't
right,
call
that we're solely
responsible. Be like, hey, you deal with this.
Yeah, exactly. So it becomes a different world, when you suddenly have to really think about like savings in a different way. I know for my usual collaborators, they're very much there too, particularly Kelsey and Danny, because they had a baby. And so like they're on a whole other level of like, can I just throw, even $500 towards a short the way that I maybe would have? Like the answer is no, because now there's a whole other being that they have to pay a lot of money for at least the next 18 years. And I know for you, like you do want a family one day, so that like
and
your
a
savings
house to have pipes burst in and all that kind of stuff. Like I've been talking about like the nest egg that I've been saving up the past couple of years since the pandemic, really, because like the silver lining of the pandemic for us is that we lived with my mom for several months once we stopped living in New York, and we basically had no expenses. Like we paid for food while we were there, like for the whole house, but like my mom wasn't having us pay rent. We weren't paying utilities, nothing like that, but we were both still working full time. And so we were able to put a lot more into savings than we otherwise might have. And I'm also just like, I don't like spending money anyways. I think we talked about this in the freelancing episode that is not out yet. That's the next episode. So you'll hear me talk about how I never feel stable. But like I've been talking to people about it, when they're like, oh my gosh, are you like worried about being unemployed? And it's like intellectually, yes, but I do have a savings account for this very purpose. However, I was hoping that the purpose of this savings account could be a down payment on a house, to start that next phase of things. And so to your point, like, yeah, you think differently about money. And also for me, I think it's a lot more of like a quality of life thing. Because like I'm no longer content to be miserable, and I haven't been for a long time. And as much as I love being on set, there are certain like elements of misery that you kind of accept in the way that I used to do things that I don't think I would be content to accept anymore.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is the like taking it all on myself. And it's not that like other people weren't working. That's not what I mean to say at all. But like I was always the instigator. It was always on me to like say, this is the thing we're doing. Usually that meant I have written a script. We are doing this. I was the one that was calling for all the meetings. I was the one that was organizing everything. And like, I was happy to do that for a while, but like, I want to have a life. I want to hang out with my husband and go to movies and, see my friends non-professionally and have time to read 400 books a year and like work on other creative projects that are fulfilling and don't make me miserable. And I cannot be the only person instigating things. Well, it's like people will pitch me stuff all the time like, oh, what if we did this thing? I'm like, cool, yeah, let me know. And then they never follow up. And it's like in my past life I would have followed up. I would have been dogged about it. I would have been like, yeah, let's do this, and like put as much of it together as I could. I can't do that anymore. Once I have a thing again, I probably will, but in the meantime, that does not sound appealing to me at all, and I don't have to take it anymore.
Same.
I don't have to do that, so why would I?
Yeah, I mean, I very much the same for me since moving and like really working on slowing down my life and enjoying the quiet and enjoying the slower pace. which has been so hard for me because I'm such a always have to be acting, making things happen. Otherwise, I have no value. I'm not, I'm not worthy.
Yeah.
And having to really
one of our initial ways of bonding was both of us being oh, your identity is also work and being the girl that does everything. Cool. Let's be friends.
Right. So really, I'm proud of the work I've done on myself to take that away and still find identity and find
self-esteem,
value. Yeah, self-esteem, and actually really enjoying just being, and being I'm just gonna sit in this chair and read for a couple hours, and that's fine, that. I think that was a big part of it too, was feeling. I started listing all the things I'd have to do in my head, and I was why go back to that for what purpose? Who is it serving? And if I'm not in love with all of that, if that is actually stressing me out just to think about those things, then I should not be doing it. There's no reason, I need to be excited about it. And of course, production always comes with stress, and my feature will absolutely be stressful, but it's exciting to me. It feels like a challenge. Mm-hmm. It feels like a new adventure, as opposed to I'm like we said, going backwards. I'll be going backwards to this thing that wasn't sustainable. And the things about myself that I've really unpacked over the last 3 years, a lot of things I've started to realize are really just trauma responses. So much of my personality is from growing up the way I grew up, where I had to be an adult as a kid, and I felt like I had to always be on top of things and perfect because things around me were chaotic and there were abusive figures and whatnot. And so all of these things that were things I was proud of and are not bad things. And I don't want to disparage things that were, made me. They were ultimately trauma responses. So the point is, I don't need to be going backwards.
Well, and I think something that's come out of both of our speaking on this topic today is that it's not that, and I hope that this is not what people are taking away, but it's not that we don't want to work hard. It's not that we are imagining this bizarro utopia world where filmmaking is cool beans the whole way through. Everyone's chill and working hard, and it's just beautiful. It's that's obviously never a thing, no matter how much you love the project. Ace and Anxious was a dream in many ways, and it was also one of the most stressful 3 weeks of my life. Someone broke their foot on the first day of set. One of our actors could only be there for our main actress could only be there for half days. Even one of the best creative and professional experiences of my life, deeply stressful. But I think what it sounds like for both of us, the difference is we are excited about the stress, asterisks, if it's the right project. And it's just about putting our energy behind things that really matter. I think in both of our cases, if tomorrow one of us or both of us had an idea for a short that we were genuinely excited about, we would just do it and we would figure it out. And there would be additional things to consider there. But since we don't have that, we are no longer in a place in our creative careers where the grind is worth it for the sake of having something new to talk about.
Right. Absolutely. I think this episode only makes sense in context of especially our first season, where you hear all we've done and all the hats we wore and how much we were grinders, Yeah, and so it only really makes sense. If you're listening to this as a first-time listener, it probably just sounds like two entitled people talking shit about indie film or something, but that's so not it. It's just...
Which is a thing that's come up in our script where people are why are they so down on this? And it's because they're tired, because they've done this for so long and they just want to move forward, or at the very least not be miserable anymore.
Yeah, and I also think it's just the industry at large, we're in the middle of a strike.
We're in the middle of a double strike, a historic double strike.
Yeah. And so, I think we've all reevaluated our relationship with hustle culture and whatever it takes-ness of the industry in particular, and get the shot at all costs, even if it means someone dies on train tracks, we've done so much reevaluating that it would be impossible to do it the same way we did it before. it just doesn't exist anymore. Like that reality and that world doesn't exist anymore. And that person that I was has evolved, you know?
Speaking to like grind culture and stuff, it's like previous Bri was just grateful to have a job adjacent to the community, was just appreciative of having the opportunity, all that kind of stuff. The Bri of now is not afraid of being a barista again. It's rare that those kind of jobs can, like, with a straight face say, like, we're a family, because, like, we're all here clocking in and out. But when you work for, like, a startup, especially one in, like, the arts industry, you know, there's a lot more sort of, like, toxic stuff that like you're expected to just take, especially when your identity as an artist is part of the reason that you were hired, and you have to kind of like subsume the company branding in your off time. And that's something I don't think I'm willing to go back to.
Same.
And that speaks to kind of the short film conversation that we're having, which is like, what are we willing to put up with now? Like, to what end?
Yeah. I also just, like, last point I want to make is that I got a taste of not having to wear all the hats through the development process of my feature, even though, yes, the trade-off was less creative control and having to
make concessions.
Make concessions creatively, like still making sure I'm sticking to my vision. But yeah, it did require allowing other people to sort of be a chef in the kitchen, you know? It also allowed me to take stuff off of my plate and like not have to think about things that I didn't ever want to think about. And it was really hard at first for me to turn that part of my brain off and to like embrace not having to be the primary producer of the thing. But now I've like kind of gotten used to it a little bit, especially as we started talking about production, and it was like they're working on the budget and they're the ones finding the locations and they're just going to present them to me. That now I'm kind of like, I only want to do that. I don't want to bring those hats back on my head and weigh myself down now that I've gotten a taste of what it could be like without it. And so that, like, that's the other thing too, is just seeing the other side, like having sort of the glass, like the dirty glass is cleaned and now I can see clearly. And I'm like, I can't go back to making them all dirty again. And I don't know.
You know what's funny is I had the same experience, and I think it's because the last two major things I worked on, I was just the director on. Like, I guess for Rosalie, I was also the editor, and like, you know, I did a handful of producing duties, but like it was not my project. I was very much there as like a contract worker in very specific roles. And on Better With You, it was even more like, Bri, you are the director, and that is it. Like, I had to sign a contract that was like, these are things that are not my fucking problem. And I really appreciated that. As much as like it was uncomfortable at first because I'm used to having a lot of control and a lot of say in things, it was also wonderful. I just got to show up and do one thing. I got to focus. I got to just like be exact. Like, I even on set, like the DP who was one of the producers had to be like, Bri, stop worrying about this. That's a concern for someone who is not you. She's like, just let it happen. I promise you it will. You do not have to have this on your plate. Just focus on directing. And like, what a gift. Why would I ever go back to something else? I would go back to slightly more control because I am who I am. But yeah, God, having someone else to be able to, I mean, even co-writing our feature has like spoiled me. I'm like, wow, I never want to write alone again.
Same. But that's like, I think like us having worn all the hats previously makes us so kind of prepared for anything, you know? Because we understand all of the sides of things. And so that would make us great directors for producers to work with, because we're not going to be unreasonable and we understand how things work. And so my feeling is just like, we shouldn't have to. This is where a little bit of the entitlement comes in. Like, we shouldn't have to wear all the hats to direct something again or to bring a story to life again, because we've done the work, and now we want to be at least this next level where someone else is sharing some of that weight.
Yeah. It's too bad that we don't live near each other and we have the same roles. Because like, we are such ideal collaborators in so many ways, except for the fact that we are in pretty much direct competition for the kinds of work that we want to do.
Other than this shared script, we do pretty different work. Like, our approach to tone and story, the kinds of stories we want to tell, outside of maybe like thematic or subtextual similarities, they're very different on their base like plot and genre.
But it's like, how do I replace someone who is you but doesn't want to be a writer director and likes and is more like aligned on the genres?
Yeah.
Where do we find that person?
I mean,
How do we
that's
move
been
forward?
forever the struggle. That's been forever the struggle. And I've always wondered that at festivals when I would meet directors and they're like, this is my producer. And I'm just like, how did you get that person? Especially when it's like those producers weren't being paid, because it was like a short film. Most of the time it was like they met in film school and they're just sort of unicorns, these producers that just want to produce.
I know. I've met like 2 or 3 of those people recently, actually, just like at events, and they're like, yeah, I just wish I met someone. I was like, literally, if you just say I'm a producer who just wants to produce, you will never stop getting emails. Like, what are you talking about? You can't find people. Like, you are a unicorn. No one has you.
And right, because they're also like, they don't get a lot of the credit, but often in more traditional sets are doing a lot of the work, without thank yous and without recognition. But yeah, I don't know. Even my producers that I'm working with on my feature technically are not people who only produce and only want to produce. My film is like a way to prove a model can work that will hopefully benefit their own films as well.
Right.
Or in the case of like Lily Wachowski, who has been a mentor through this whole process, she obviously is a director, right. More than anything, a writer-director.
She's really there in like a mentorship perspective.
And like comes with production company contacts and such. So yeah, her producing is more of like a creative guidance producer. But but like the ones who were boots on the ground producing, even they're a little bit kind of like doing this as a way to pivot into getting their own thing off the ground eventually. So yeah, it's really hard to come by, I find, people who just have a passion for producing.
Or being able to afford those people. That's also the other
right,
thing. Is,
totally.
I in theory have people that I can think of who would produce, but they would need to get paid. And then that brings us back to, boy, howdy, do I not want to crowdfund.
Like paying or, even profit sharing, but it's like films don't make money.
Yeah,
so
and
I
don't want to go into that and set that expectation.
Right. So it's really hard. But I love those people that exist. Love you that you see someone else's story and fall in love with it enough to want to devote so much to it. I just wish there were more of you. Yeah. Or that I had met you earlier when we were at equal points in our careers so we could grow together the way I've grown with all these other collaborators who also don't want to produce.
Yeah, is that like all of the people that, like we are now at a point in our careers that like we can't grow with people anymore. We have to meet people on a very different level, which is a harder starting point for a relationship when you don't already have money.
Right, yeah. Yeah, and I think also as someone, people love to call me prolific, like you're such prolific. And so it's like when you have such a body of work, even if it's no budget work, even if it's like things you've made self-funding and favors and paying, at this point I always pay people, but it's never going to be competitive rates at all. It's still always very much going to be a favor, in terms of my more recent shorts. But even so, just having like enough volume, you've made enough things, at a certain point it's just like a bad look. Like you can't be asking people to be working for nothing. And so I would be embarrassed to ask a producer at this point. So it's like, either I can afford you or that's it, I'm doing it all myself.
Yeah, I guess my conclusion to this is that like I want to be on set, but until I have a thing that I care about enough to sacrifice what I know needs to be sacrificed to be on set, I am not beating myself up about being here. Because I think it would be a different story if I wasn't working on anything. but we have our script. I have
Yeah.
3 books that I wrote last year that I'm in editing for, and I'm writing a 4th. I have a newsletter that I'm really enjoying writing, and a handful of people have started to pay me for, which is bizarre, but amazing. Like, I have this podcast that we're working on. I have a handful of other like smaller projects that I'm given a little bit of time to. I have a writers group that's right now 1 person, and another friend who I regularly have like writing accountability sessions with. And like, I feel very creatively fulfilled right now. And it sucks that that does not also mean that I am on set, because I do love and miss being on set, but I'm in a really good place. Like, I'm happier than I have been in a really long time. Like, I posted on Twitter the other day because I have this mood tracker app that I update, and I have been updating for like 800 days in a row. It's just like a accountability thing, and to just kind of keep an eye on like, hey, I've been miserable for a while. Maybe some things should change. The last month or so, all good days. Like, even days that are a little bit frustrating or that like I have to work for a while on. It's like, no, I feel really good about how I am spending my energy. And that's a pretty fucking cool place to be, because I have never been in that place. So I'm going to take it one day at a time, and I'm not going to make any grand statements about what I should be doing, because I feel like I'm already doing it.
Yeah. And that's, I feel like, most people in the world as it exists, unfortunately, don't get that. So
yeah, I'm not taking it for granted. Not at all.
Yeah. I don't know what people can take away from this, especially as they may be like out of work because they're on strike, or they're,
or they're not at this place yet.
Yeah, they're not at this place yet. And hopefully, they will be at some point. But I hope that this conversation has been something comforting or enlightening or
validating.
Just validating, or just like a decently enjoyable way to kill an hour and 15 minutes, or an hour and a half, whatever this ends up editing down to.
Thanks so much to Kelsey Rauber for our theme music, Kaylee Brown for our podcast art, and to all of you for listening. Links to learn more about Kelsey and Kaylee, as always, plus our wonderful guests, are in our episode description. And thank you to our Booby VIPs, our $10 supporters on Patreon, Brandy Nicole and Kelsey Rauber. If you want your name on that list and to have access to our bonus resources related to each and every episode, including this one, you should subscribe for as little as $3 to our Patreon at patreon.com/breakingoutpod.